When you hear world's first autofocus anamorphic lens, what comes to mind? When I first heard that, my mind straight went to, oh man, that's just too good. What's the catch? To answer that question properly, I studied these two lenses thoroughly for past 1 month and went far as pushing the limits like this. Hey, how's it going, guys? My name is Say Park. I'm a filmmaker based out of Washington, D.C. I'm also official second shooter for Vu from MVU Films. But right now, we're off season for weddings, so I had some time to really geek out about these two lenses. So in this video, we're going to talk about the good things about these two lenses, but also the bad parts about these two lenses. So if you're a keyboard troll, get that keyboard out. But really, I just want to help you guys make the proper decision when it comes to purchasing lenses like this. So I want to help you guys set the expectation correctly. But before we get started, I need to tell you what firmware these two lenses are on, because that's an important thing. So Blazar already went through, this is their third firmware. So this is at the latest firmware, along with the Sirui. This is the second firmware. These are the versions right now. So I did apply those and make sure I tested throughout these videos. And as a disclaimer, Sirui did send this lens to me. In fact, I don't have to make this video. I already made my requirement, which was the reel I made. So I don't have to make this video, but I'm making it. And Blazar lens, I did purchase this with my own money. And I'm very excited to compare these two to share with you guys. And also for myself, because I gotta decide whether to keep these lenses or not. So for that purpose, I ain't gonna talk about the full frame capabilities of these two lenses, because one of them had really surprising results. So all the sample footage you're gonna see are mostly from my Sony a7 IV, which has the APS-C mode. I know Sirui makes this lens for other cameras, but a lot of the characteristics that I'm going to share with you should be similar, especially finding out if these two lenses are truly 1.33 times the squeeze. And I can tell you right now, one of them is definitely not. First, let's go over some physical difference between these two lenses, and this is the section where I'll start to reveal one of the flaws. Let's start with the aperture ring. The Sirui one has a declickable aperture ring, so I can click on, you can hear that, and off, and it's smooth. But most importantly for me, it has this dial right here. So that A represents auto, which means that I can control the aperture from my camera with the camera dial. Whereas in the Blazar one, it does not have a declickable aperture ring. It is smooth to spin it, but problem with this I find is that the ring is very skinny and thin. And if you have a cage on your camera, it is hard to reach over and actually spin this and know where it's at. And it doesn't have an A for auto, which means that you cannot control the aperture with your camera. Now, practically, this introduces one more issue. I'm going to show you that a little bit more detail later, but if you guys can imagine, on the phone app, you cannot control the aperture via the phone, obviously, because there's no auto on this and everything is physical. Now, if you want to control this aperture ring with the motor, I do think it's going to be difficult to put a gear on it because it is very thin and slippery. When it comes to the actual focus ring, on the other hand, yeah, this is pre-geared, and this thing is the smoothest thing I ever experienced. But there's one flaw with this design. I love the look of it, but you understand this if you ever use a fishing reel on sand. If you ever get sand in here, because there's a huge cutout and because that spins inside, yeah, that's gonna be an issue if you shoot this in the beach or desert. So I will be careful getting some sand in that mechanism, but really I wanted to tell you guys about this switch right here. So this is the manual focus to automatic focus switch. And you might be wondering, what's the deal with that? So Blazar Apex technically is a focus by wire with hard stops, and there's a conflict with that. I share this on my Instagram in detail, but I'm gonna do a little short version of this. Essentially, if you toggle to manual focus in your camera and you focus to something close and you're close at the minimal focus distance, turn your camera off, turn it back on and go to manual focus, it will no longer be in focus because it has a reset. It resets to the default focus level, but the problem now is now you try to manually focus to that range, but you can't go anymore because there's a hard stop on it. Well, there's also one more issue with this toggle. Let's say you're on this automatic focus mode physically, and you focus to the person speaking, and we do this a lot during weddings or interviews. You say, okay, that person's in focus. I'm gonna go ahead and lock to manual focus. So even if the person moves a little bit, it's not hunting. Well, here's the problem. Soon as you go to manual focus on this toggle, it's gonna go straight to wherever the dial is. So if your dial was at 2.4 feet, it's just gonna jump to there and you're gonna lose that focus you already found using automatic focus. So that's the conflict with this system. And guys, I know it's gonna sound like I'm just nitpicking at this Blazar lens. Oh, don't worry, I'm gonna pick on this Sirui lens later, but I really want the brands to watch this video. I definitely know Sirui is gonna watch this video. I'm not sure about Blazar, but I want them to watch it and really improve on it for the next one. So yeah. Keyboard trolls, put that keyboard down for now. There's more opportunities later. All right, so let's talk about the Sirui one. So Sirui focus ring, this is definitely focused by wire. I mean, you just know because it just spins infinitely, right? So yes, it has a nice gear around it. You could put a motor on it, but it's kind of pointless because there's no hard stop and this isn't really linear. And since we're on the topic of focus, I have to tell you guys the Sirui lens has a pretty loud autofocus motor sound. It's a little bit to catch up. Whereas in the Blazar one, it's practically silent. All right, so let's talk about the weather sealing of these two lenses. So both of these lenses don't advertise it as like a weather seal lens, but they both do have rubber gaskets. And one of the things you can't really tell from the picture is that the Blazar one, although it's nice and blue one here, the rubber, you can't really feel it. It's not raised at all. Whereas in the Sirui one, this rubber black one right here, yeah, it's very raised, so this is good. And since I have these lenses open already, you'll notice that they do both have USB-C ports right here. This is for firmware updates. And since I updated the firmware on both lenses, they are so easy to update. So you don't need any third-party software. You just gotta plug it into your computer. It'll just show up like a USB drive and you just drop the file in there. Bam, done. Now, in terms of the build quality, I have to say both Sirui and Blazar, especially Blazar, when you look at it, this is a very nicely constructed metal casing. The Sirui one, although I know it's all black, but this is also aluminum. And when it comes to weight, I have to tell you guys, they actually are lighter than it looks. Blazar one's about 100 grams heavier than the Sirui one, but they're both light. They're lighter than my 24-70 DG DN Sigma lens, so I can definitely gimbal these. And lastly, I know this isn't a huge deal, although it's something you're gonna have to deal with every single time you use a lens, is the lens cap. So Sirui one has the traditional squeeze and pop open, whereas in the Blazar one, I have to tell you, right now it's winter, my hands are so dry, I feel like I'm in the desert. So here's the issue with the Blazar. Very nice metal casing lens cap. However, the way you open this, you have to grab the tip and just pull it, but it slips out of your hand so much. So if you're gunning this thing and you just want to get that off, yeah, you're gonna be struggling sometimes, especially outside when it's cold. And you can get it out. So yeah, this does give you cool points in your camera bag, but when it comes to actual practicality, I do like this squeeze method better. But really, the other issue is that this is a 77mm thread, same with the Blazar. So right now on the Sirui one, I do have a step-up ring. So a lot of my filters are 82mm. So I bought this K&F filter. This fits pretty well, and there's two of them in there. So when you put your lens cap back on, you do have to wiggle a little bit, but it does work. Whereas if you have a step-up ring, you're not gonna be able to use that cap, meaning you can't just permanently have that step-up ring in there. But what's funny is that you can put Sirui lens cap on the Blazar. Now this is Blazar lens from Temu. All right, I sense that you want to get a little bit more serious and get geeky in this video. You want to get geeky? Let's get geeky. Let's talk about stretch factors of these two lenses. Now, this is important in two manners. First, you want these lenses to be constant stretch factor, meaning whether you focus something on close range or far range, you don't want that image to squeeze back and forth, essentially having different stretch factor depending on where you're focused. So you don't want that. A lot of the budget anamorphic lenses have that issue, and you also want to make sure that you're getting the stretch factor correctly. So they're advertised as 1.33 on both of them, and you would use that number on post to stretch it, but if you get that wrong, you're gonna look like you lost some weight, which could be a good thing, but it's gonna look funny. You just gonna know, look at the face in the middle and go, oh, something's like really off. So how do you find out these lenses have constant stretch factor? You have to find the perfect circle in this world. And I happen to have one. So I never know what Elon's gonna do next, but I do know if there's one person who's gonna make the perfect circle, it's gonna be Elon. So I'm gonna use my Tesla wheel as the example. And yes, I leased this car like over a year ago. So anyways, so I filmed the wheel in 3 different distances for the both lens, and I make sure it's perfectly perpendicular. And no matter where the focus is for both lenses, these 2 lenses, I can tell you, they have perfect constant stretch factor, which is good. But when it comes to actual stretch factor number, they're gonna be a little bit different. In my past anamorphic review videos, I go over how I get this number exactly down to a pixel. If you guys are interested in that video, check this out. But here's my finding. The Sirui one is practically almost 1.33. So this is 1.337, meaning on post, you'll stretch this out by 133.7%. Whereas in the Blazar one, this one actually surprised me. This one is actually 1.368 times the squeeze. On post, you'll stretch this by 136.8%. That makes a lot of sense because there's a lot more anamorphic characteristics in this, which we'll see later. So when you guys use this in post, these are the actual resolution sequence I will put in, and you can put that sequence into whatever the final product is, whether it's 16:9 or CinemaScope. And usually I would have a preset for you guys on these lenses, but honestly, I didn't have a lot of time. I just wanted to get this video out to you guys first, but if I do end up keeping the lenses, I'll probably make a preset for you guys. So at wide open at t1.8, both of these lenses are a little bit soft, especially in these corners, as you can see. Now you'll notice that Blazar has a little bit more chromatic aberration wide open than the Sirui one, but one thing I can tell right away from these charts is that the Blazar one has a very nice barrel distortion, whereas in the Sirui one, it has a little bit of barrel distortion, but on the edges, it has pincushion distortion. And depending on who you ask, some people actually like that distortion. Me personally, I do like a little bit of barrel distortion. It does remind me of that Cook lens. And same with chromatic aberration. Some people like them, especially towards the edges. I just personally don't like a lot of chromatic aberration in the center of the image. So at T2, the chromatic aberration is a little bit better on the Blazar. And obviously, as you stop down more, the image is going to be sharper. Now, I should mention that Sirui lens can close all the way down to T22, whereas in the Apex Blazar can close down to T16. Alright, so let's talk about the full frame usability of these 2 lenses, because one of them, when I found out you can totally use this for full frame, I was so excited. And yes, that lens is going to be the Sirui one. So this is an interesting one because with the Sony Active Stave, which is 1.1 times crop, you are barely getting any vignetting on the corners on the Sirui lens. Now this is without the Active Stave, and now with, you see the difference? And here is Blazar without Active Stave, and here's with Active Stave. Now there's gonna be some suggestions online that you could clear image zoom using the Blazar and get rid of that vignetting, and it's totally usable at clear image zoom 1.2 times, and with Active Stave this is what it'll look like. But here's the issue with the clear image zoom. So when you clear image zoom with this camera, you're gonna lose touch focus. So I rather have touch focus. So I was shooting this example shot, I couldn't touch my friend, that sounds weird, but I couldn't touch him, that sounds even more weird, to focus, you know what I mean? Yeah. Yes, I just realized the TV bokeh, it's back. And speaking of bokeh, it's not an anamorphic review unless we talk about the bokeh. And you're gonna be able to see this in the example, but the Sirui has 11 aperture blades, whereas in the Blazar has 16 aperture blades. Now, when you look at real life bokeh examples like this, you can't really tell that Sirui has a hexagon bokeh. This is wide open at T1.8, and the hexagon shape does disappear right around T2.5, I'm generous. Whereas in the Blazar one, oh my goodness, T1.8, it is absolutely gorgeous, oval shaped anamorphic bokeh. I don't know how they squeeze that in there. Now, I do have to mention that wide open at T1.8, as we saw on the chart, the Blazar is gonna have some chromatic aberration, but again, like, I think it's tasteful. And these examples also show up the anamorphic flares. Now, Sirui does make a blue flare version. This is the neutral version here. And Blazar, they advertise this as a silver flare. This is what that looks like. Now, which one looks better? It's gonna be very subjective, but in my experience, Sirui does flare a lot more. It does have thicker secondary band there, whereas in Blazar it's a little bit thinner. Let me know in the comments below which flare you guys like better. Now I did experience whenever it flared too much, the autofocus in the camera, it did get confused a little bit. So let's talk about autofocus. I mean, that is the whole point of these lenses, right? Now both Sirui and Blazar is gonna claim that they are the world's first automatic focus anamorphic lens, but so we'll let them figure out who has a bigger lens. But in this video, I want to really help you set the proper expectation when it comes to autofocus performance. But before I show you guys the actual example footage of the automatic focus, I need to tell you guys two things. First topic is going to be focus breathing. Now Sirui is going to have a much noticeable focus breathing as opposed to Blazar. In fact, Blazar has very good control on focus breathing. Second is going to be the minimum focus distance. Now they both around 2 feet, which is actually really good for anamorphic lenses because I'm so used to 3 feet. Now it's kind of weird when you go to B&H website, Blazar Apex 50mm is showing that it has 67 centimeter as the minimum focus distance, whereas in the actual official website it says 65, and I did test it out. It's more like 67, which is a little bit over 2 feet, whereas in the Sirui one is just shy of 2 feet. Now remember that because that topic's gonna come up again when I show you guys this automatic focus examples. So here's the truth, guys. I've been using this for a very long time, and I have to say, whenever a lens decides to focus, the automatic focus is fairly good. And I say fairly because I am comparing it to the modern day Sony glass, and those automatic focus is like tack sharp right on there. Whereas in these feel like it's a little bit behind times. As you guys see in these examples, it just doesn't have that stickiness and that smooth following. And yes, I know these are the first of its kind, so I'm kind of being harsh maybe, but sometimes in a very obvious, very still subject, it just would not focus. That's why I said whenever it wants to. And no, this is not just like a one-time thing. It's just gonna happen multiple times. I'll show you more examples later. But if I were to compare it directly between Blazar and Sirui, I would say the Blazar has a little bit more advantage when it comes to actual tracking smoothness, as if the motor is dampened, whereas in Sirui one, the autofocus does have the speed. So it'll go from close focus to far focus real quick, but it doesn't have that smooth dampening like the Blazar has. So remember that focus breathing issue that Sirui has? This is where it gets kind of tricky if you are stopping down. Like for example, this is T9, where you can start to see the tree in focus. And because the motor is being quick, trying to catch up with the subject, you can see that pulsing. Now throughout these tests, my camera setting was set at the second fastest autofocus setting. So I suppose you could slow that down on the Sirui one to kind of compensate for that. But here's the truth, guys. I can't depend on both of these lenses to get that shot, especially those one take shot, perfectly in focus. Especially when it's wide open and the camera can clearly see my face, and it does the face detection. I can see the square on my eye and my face, but it just would not focus on me. Even being behind the camera, I can see the square being focused on a face, and when I come back to my computer and look at it, yeah, it's a little bit off. And I know the naysayer might say, hey, maybe you were actually too close to the lens, you know? Close focus distance, remember, was 2 feet. So I made sure I was well beyond like 3 feet. And as you can see in this example, when I get closer, I'm actually sharper in focus. So that's around minimal focus distance. And when I step back, again, it's just off. And I would even experience these automatic focus issues when I'm focusing to that chart. So that chart, it has very high contrast, and most lenses I test with has no problem focusing on that. But these two are just a little bit off, and I sometimes had to rely on manual focus. So when it came to like pushing these lenses to the limit, you guessed it right, that car shot was very hard to focus. First of all, it was super dark. I was relying on T1.8 for both lenses, and there was so much flare sometimes the camera just really had a hard time focusing. But if I were to directly compare Blazar against Sirui for that difficult situation, I would say Blazar did actually focus better. Again, I was trying to push the limits on these guys. I'm sure when you do these shoots that during the day, it will actually perform much better. But my job here is to really just push the limits so you guys know where those limits are. So I did try these for photos, burst photos that is. Yes, I realize these are anamorphic video lenses, but there's first tests for everything. I know there's some photographers out there who are actually trying to see, you know, like maybe I can take some photos with it. and, you know, capture someone running. And I have to tell you, that's not gonna work. Even if that moving subject is an old 42-year-old man running backwards, that is, it just can't keep up, guys. So it'll take pretty good picture on the first shot, but anything after that, it's pretty much a miss. So for a very still subject, you can take some unique photos with this. I did try this. Even then, you'll probably have to take multiple photos to make sure that it's in focus. So the autofocus is there. I'm not saying it's unusable. It's just that you can't rely on it every single time like you were used to. So the solution here really is to use a monitor. So Sony cameras, you know, they have this tiny screen. You think it's in focus and you come to a computer, it's not. So these two lenses aren't for everyone. For weddings where you get one chance to get that in focus, I probably wouldn't rely on these. Also for run and gun self-filming, I probably wouldn't trust that it's in focus when I'm not looking at the monitor. But if you're able to utilize automatic focus with manual focus in combination using a monitor, these are amazing. This is an exciting times, guys. We finally have automatic focus in anamorphic lenses. So if you set the expectation correctly, I think these two lenses can be awesome lenses. Blazar having absolutely beautiful anamorphic look at this form factor, and Sirui being so versatile. I mean, like, I'm getting 2 focal length out of this basically. So if I set my expectation correctly and imagine this Sirui lens as a T2.5 full frame lens, I might have better experience with it along with the correct expectation on the automatic focus performance. So that's the truth behind these two lenses, guys. I hope this video is helpful. Please give it a thumbs up if it did. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Till next time, here are some sample footage.